Welcome to One Insight. My name is Rich Litvin. I grew up in London and I now live in LA. And this is a podcast for extraordinary top performers. You see, I've coached some of the most successful and talented people on the planet. I see what most people cannot see, and I dare to say what most people wouldn't dare to say. And what I know about success is that on the other side of it, it can actually be lonely. You can feel like more of an imposter the more successful you become. And when you're the most interesting person in the room, you're actually in the wrong room. I coach around insight. Life looks one way, something happens, the world looks different, and your entire world changes. It can happen in an instant. And this podcast is called One Insight because a single insight can change everything.
There's a way of coaching that most coaches approach their art and craft. I call it remedial coaching. The client shows up with a problem. The coach says, let me help you solve it. They solve the problem. Coach says, what's your next problem? They solve that ad infinitum. Nothing wrong with that. There's a place where coaching is extraordinary for problem solving. And what I love the most is when I get to show up with a client who says, you know what, life's kind of good. I'm okay. Or I don't know what to talk about today. I don't have any problems. Because I like to say, well, let's start there. Let's start from this place where life is great. And then I'll see what comes next. Sometimes I'll say, what would you love to create? Sometimes I'll say, what's on your mind? And we'll see where we go. And that's exactly what happened today. Carolyn shows up and she says, life's good. I've got nothing to talk about, nothing on my mind. And so we start this interesting conversation. And it turns out to be a conversation about creating an extraordinary relationship. But we couldn't have got there from Carolyn coming in because it wasn't where she would have gone. It's the art of coaching rather than the science of coaching, about listening to what's between the words. Have fun. Well, hi, Carolyn. Before we begin, if you're listening at home or in the car or on a walk right now, if you hear this kind of slapping sound in the background, my wife is out boxing with her trainer in the backyard, and we didn't time this perfectly. So you may hear some screams or slaps as she hits the pads. But Carolyn, it's great to be with you.
Thank you, Rich. Same.
How would you like to play today? We can go anywhere you like. I'm here. You're here. How can I serve you?
So, when I got the invitation to converse with you on the podcast, I didn't think twice about it. I also, I'm not coming with a specific issue or problem. What I have found being in your community now quite robustly, but really following you for the last 5 years, 6 years or so, is I never know what's going to come up, what the learning is going to be, what the insight is going to be, but it will be very useful and profound. So I'm happy to play full out and go any direction. You know me a little bit, so any direction you think with your curiosity would lead us.
I like that. It's a really good example of, I call it remedial coaching. Someone shows up with a problem. The coach says, let me help you. They solve the problem. Now what's the next problem? There's nothing wrong with that. There's a place for that. There's a time with that. I'll sometimes do that with my own clients. But as I work with people who are playing a bigger and bigger game, they're extraordinary problem solvers. Most of the time they're solving their own stuff. So it's really fun to get on a conversation and say, there's no agenda. There's nothing to talk about. Let's see where we go. So let me ask you this, and we'll see where this takes us. What's on your mind?
To be totally honest with you, what's on my mind is a family issue that showed up again last night. And I noted, when I say again, it showed up for the first time in this kind of big way a few years ago. And at that time, even though I was a coach, but a starting coach about 4 or 5 years ago, I fell into the trap of not being conscious, of getting into a game that was not my game to ever be played. So in other words, there was the trigger of family and these long-term patterns that I fell into and not being aware. And then there was a person not related to me involved who comes from a world where she knows how to play a game similar to walking into a casino for me. A game where the only way to win is to enter and exit immediately and not play at all. 5 years ago, I fell for it. And I must say, you know how you asked that question, what are 2 or 3 things that really change your life dramatically for the better?
Mm.
This was one of 2 or 3 things that changed my life for the worse. That changed my life in a way where there was a big price for me to pay and a big learning, of course, to take away. So when this happened yesterday, and it was literally a repeat of the same scenario, I realized, and I did not respond in the way I realized 5 years ago. I responded so differently with so much awareness. I realized, wow, this coaching thing really works. Mm-hmm. And again, you know how you say you teach what you need to learn most? I realize I have been teaching and teaching for this moment so that when I find myself as a coach in a pattern, I can be observant of hitting my upper limit and taking a step back and saying, okay, what do you want to do with this now, today? So this is what's on my mind right now. And it's for me a bigger conversation. I know your community is full of coaches, for coaches to have and to hold with each other.
Well, let me take you out of there for a second. I want to go somewhere. Let's see where I go with this one. What I heard is there was an area of your life where you were unconscious. And when somebody showed up in a certain way, you'd respond automatically, driven, your heart, your gut said, I have the guttural response. And as all these years have passed, you realize, wow, I'm show up in a different way these days. And I can see how proud you are of yourself, the work you've done to get you there.
Yeah. That's what I see. I also see my Enneagram 8, which I never believed in personality tests.
I'm going to keep that for a second. Here's where I would like to go.
Yeah.
That's where you were unconscious all those years ago, and you see the journey you've been on.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you unconscious now?
I don't know if I'm entirely unconscious, because you find these things out in the arena. So I didn't know what I just shared with you until this thing happened last night. And I was like, oh, wow, I am more conscious than I was. Mm-hmm. I wonder, given that I'm not in an intimate relationship right now, I wonder if that is where I am still unconscious, and I can only find out in the arena, like in the relationship in real time, which feels really scary because you want to go in feeling like you're conscious, but it's a difference between information. I'm informed about how to go in differently. I'm not sure that in the moment I will show up differently.
I used to do martial arts years ago, and our teacher grew up in the streets of London, and he was a real rough guy. And it was a tough training. You'd come home with bruises all over your body because he believed if you can't take a punch, I don't care how how fancy your kicks are, out on the street, if someone sucker punches you, you need to know what it feels like to take a punch and then get back up. And I hear you saying this, like, how do I know if I've worked on myself enough to be in a relationship if I'm not in a relationship?
Yes.
Would you like to be?
Yes, I would.
How can I help?
You can introduce me to a great man.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more about this great man. I lost a great man.
It's a big hey yo.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that I will meet the right man for me today through people who know me well,
mm-hmm.
through people who know who I am truly and deeply. And my coaching community, and most recently 4PC, I feel is a group of people that really we see each other.
Did you ever hear the story about Garrison, who was a member of 4PC, and the love letter?
No.
So Garrison was in 4PC for about 5 years in total. He was on the source team as well as a member of 4PC. And he said, one day, I realize I'd like to settle down. I've done all sorts of extraordinary things in my life, and I'd really like to settle down with somebody. So I gave him an invitation. I said, write a letter to the woman you'd like to be with and tell her all about you, who you are, what you want, what you don't want, hold nothing back. And then that's a letter that you'll share with your friends. Because so often we don't do this, right? We do all the dating apps or the blind dates or hope our friends will know someone. Or back in the day, I used to go to clubs and bars, even though I hated clubs and bars, hoping that I'd meet someone. Although the chances are, since I don't like that stuff, that my partner might not either. And it never seemed to work. And so I said, well, why don't you put this back into your control? It's created life, right? What if you wrote this letter? And he got a bit nervous and he talked about it. He said he would do it and didn't hear anything for quite a while. About 3 months later, he wrote to me and said, hey, I've written this letter and I've decided I'm going to put it on my Facebook page to share with the people who know me the best. And I wrote back to him, he texted me and I said, hey, would you mind if I share it too? He said, no, sure, that would be okay. Well, we had a misunderstanding because he thought I meant I had one or two women I knew that I would share it with. What I actually meant is that I have a community of about 30,000 people on different social media channels and so on, and I was going to repost it. And so he texted me a while later to say, oh my God, I just realized what happened. I didn't mean that. And I wrote back and said, oh my God, I just realized what happened. Would you like me to take it down? And he decided, you know what, I'm going to lean into the universe and let this happen. Well, I wonder if there's something like that we can create for you. And I don't mean me posting on social media, but what if you actually told your friends, hey, this is what I'm looking for? So I got this idea from a friend of mine who's a coach, and he helped a man create his relationship, the woman he's married to, because he wrote a letter like this. And when I got a copy of it, he shared it with me. I had thought of two women immediately who I introduced him to. He went on a date with one, the other one wasn't a fit. He didn't end up with either of them. In fact, he didn't end up with anyone that anyone had directly introduced him to as a result of this letter. But within a year, he'd met the person he was going to marry. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something powerful about creating your life. It's not that this letter is a magic guarantee that this person will come, but it has you step into your power about owning who you are and what you want and what you don't want. And I always remember in this particular letter, he said, I want to settle down with a woman who's independently wealthy, because he's a very wealthy man. He'd been an entrepreneur, made a lot of money, and he just made this clear distinction for himself that he wanted someone who could meet him there. It didn't matter whether you liked that idea or didn't. That was his desire. And it's good to own your desires, whatever anybody else may think. I always admired that.
So you know that I believe in the created life. I write love letters to all kinds of things I want to do. But when you said this, I had such a fear reaction. I mean, I hit such an upper limit. Like that as you were speaking, I had to just, stay calm and not yell back, no. The idea and what's coming up for me is, no, you can't write the truth because you're not going to get the truth. Like you're not going to, that man exists, but he doesn't exist for you.
Okay. So first of all, I hear you. I hear all that fear that comes up, and I hear how your intellect is trying to handle this. And the idea of this letter, this isn't like The Secret. This isn't like if I write my dream man down and sit at home one day, there'll be a knock on the door and he'll show up. For a couple of reasons. One, you may not get everything you ask for. Life doesn't always work that way. Two, our system doesn't always know what we want. Yeah, how are you doing? I had a feeling there was emotions coming up.
Yeah, just yeah, it just takes a lot of courage to say that out loud.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel kind of sad for that part of myself that feels unworthy of what I want.
Yeah.
But I'm
I'm going
here.
to ask you an edgy question right now.
Mhm.
And feel free, because this is being recorded, to say I don't want to answer that publicly. Was it your mother or your father who modeled, I'm not worthy to ask for what I want?
Gosh. I mean, not only was it modeled by both, to be completely honest, in different ways, but it was such a clear message to me that, if you show all of yourself, you're never going to be with anyone.
Yeah.
So this idea of showing all of myself, even on paper, even if nobody sees it, feels really vulnerable. And then that voice that well, look, I mean, I remember being so young and hearing, look, I mean, you're great, you're wonderful, but tone it down. You're not going to, no man is ever going to want to be with you if you don't, tone it down. So here I am with, I guess, a different version of, another version of the same thing, tone it down.
Yeah. Yeah, little boys are often encouraged to dial it up, and little girls are often encouraged to tone it down.
And you're asking me to you're write it all down, and I'm hearing tone it down, tone it down. So there's this dissonance going on inside me in this moment.
The difference between the still small voice within, your wise woman, and the voice of fear is that the still small voice within never berates you, never makes you feel small, never puts you down. So what that voice of fear is that voice of every one of your ancestors who knew that for most of history, women in your lineage shouldn't be too big, shouldn't make too much noise, shouldn't stand out, because they'd be killed, literally.
Literally. Yeah.
So it's okay to say, hey, thank you. Thank you. I know you've got my back. I appreciate you. You're looking out for me. You're looking after me. And would you be willing to trust me? I know you'll be there. You've got me if I need you. But would you be willing to trust me? That times are different to when you were around.
Yeah, I'm willing.
And that willingness is not for you, it's for them, it's for the ancestors to check them. Are they willing? Are they willing? It might sound funny, but you can literally ask them right now. Do they feel close as I say this? Do you feel this connection?
Yes, because I know they love me. So it's not a question of love. And we all have our particular histories. So, my background, the difference between my time and my mother's time is not the 20 years of age difference between the two of us.
Mm.
That's 200 years.
Mm.
I mean,
of where she grew up, her culture.
Well, my parents were born and lived in a ghetto in the Middle East. And I'm sitting in Beverly Hills in a high rise. That's not a difference of 70 years. That's a difference of hundreds of years. So I know the love is there. When you put it that way, yes, I can ask that question of them, knowing that because they love me, they want what I want today for me. It's only me.
It's edgy, right? It's not quite as clear as that. I love my little boys, and I get nervous when they run on concrete. It's like, slow down. I feel that inside of me, and I have to be willing to, can I step back? Can I let them fall? Can I let them hurt themselves? Because it's the only way that they're going to grow. And I can know that intellectually, if it's your kids, I say, go on, they're good. It's okay, they fell down, they'll be fine. But when my kids are there, I feel there's a clench. And it's that willingness to say to them, and I don't mean physically say to your parents who are alive, but to all those generations who came before them, hey, I know you're nervous because I'm doing things that none of you have ever done before. And I've got no doubt you're a family who broke the rules, who did things differently. It must be the case. So would they be willing to let you play differently and know that you'll be okay?
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
So let me check in. Would you be willing to write a letter that nobody has to see? Right now, that's the only proposal I have for you, is you write a letter to describe this dream person you'd love to be with. What you'd like, what you wouldn't like, your non-negotiables. You don't have to share this with another living soul. We can talk again if you choose to do this once it's done, and you can decide what you do with it. You might just do it purely for you and then burn it. Would you be willing to write that letter?
Yes, I would. I'll write the letter. I'll write it today before I lose my courage.
It might take courage. Yeah. Yeah. But with no pressure from me. You're not doing this for me. If you want to share it with me later, we can talk because you're in 4PC and I can support you. It's for you. And like I say, not another living soul has to see it, but even just claiming for yourself, this is what I want. This is what I don't want. This is what I will not accept under any circumstances. Oh, just to know that. And like I say, it may not be the case that, because there's what we want in relationship and there's what we need. There's what will serve us and what we think will serve us. So it doesn't mean that you'll get everything on your list. It's not like ordering off the menu, but it's for you to own what you want.
I'm less worried about getting everything on the list than like creating this list and then wanting to compromise on the list and then feeling like I can't because I've written this manifesto about what my relationship should be like. Does that make sense at all?
It does. It does. But this isn't a manifesto. This is you asking for what you want.
So why would asking feel so like, if I'm just asking, why does it feel like such a big deal?
Well, for most humans, actually, asking for what you want is one of the hardest things ever. And if you think back to the difference once again between little boys and little boys who ask for what they want, particularly once they hit puberty and sexuality comes into the mix and little boys ask for what they want, they're the coolest kids in class. God forbid a little girl should start owning what she wants around her sexuality. There are names for little girls like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have these messages hidden, implicit and explicit in society and culture that and the media that tell us what's okay and what's not okay. This is not about you putting this out in the world or sharing it with another living soul. This is for you. This is what I want.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean you'll get it and doesn't mean it'll be good for you. But it's nice to own what you want.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. As I'm breathing through the fear, I'm definitely feeling the excitement.
Mm. Yeah. Well, fear is often a mask for desire. So I'd say lean into the fear on this one. Mm-hmm. Like I say, this is not about once you've done it, put it on social media. I say don't even consider that. This is for you. That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. I look forward to hearing from you what happens on the other side, not what's on the list. That can be completely private to you, but what occurs for you on the other side of writing out. And it may not be a list. I slipped into using the word list. I'd write a love letter. You know what it's like to write love letters? Write a love letter. I wanted a new assistant a few years ago, and I can't call it a love letter because it's an assistant, but I wrote a letter to the future. I said, this is the letter I want to send you in 3 years' time. And I dated it 3 years into the future from the day that she was employed. I said, I'm thanking you for doing these things. And I thanked her in advance for all the things that I want her to do for me in this role. And I gave it to her on day one, talked it through with her, read it through with her. It's slightly different to what we're talking about here, but I'm creating the future.
I love that format. I love that framing. This is the letter I want to send you 3 years from now.
And I've hired an extraordinary assistant who understands me better than I understand myself, who knows what I need rather than what I think I want. So when in 3 years' time we sit down and read that letter, we might look back and go, oh, do you remember what you wanted back then? Wasn't what you needed.
I love that generosity, that creed. I get it. Thank you, Rich.
Yeah.
It was, as usual, the last place I thought I was going to go, but with you. That's what happens.
For most of human history, it wasn't called coaching, it was called leadership. And it's what I love to do, to coach people, to lead people, and to mess with people's thinking. If you'd like more of this, or if you'd like to learn more about our community of extraordinary top performers, go to richlitvin.com/oneinsight.